bienvenue dans cette nouvelle session Matrix42 autour de l'univers Matrix42. Et aujourd'hui, on a décidé de vous proposer un focus tout particulier sur un sujet qui va sans doute vous intéresser, qui vous anime, j'imagine, déjà au quotidien. Donc, à savoir comment on peut automatiser la découverte des assets IT de l'entreprise de manière à les centraliser, les connaître, les maîtriser, et comment je peux cartographier finalement toutes les dépendances entre ces assets pour comprendre in fine les services que je délivre, comment je les soutiens et comment ils permettent de proposer, en tout cas de délivrer un service à des utilisateurs, des collaborateurs, des clients, des services métiers. Bien entendu, une forte connotation autour de la CMDB, c'est un axe qu'on a décidé de prendre comme angle d'attaque, tout simplement parce que c'est souvent un sujet dont on discute tous ensemble, que vous soyez déjà client, prospect, partenaire, c'est un sujet qui nous anime fortement autour des sujets du service desk, de l'ITSM et au niveau des DSI plus largement. Donc, on a décidé de passer 1 heure de notre temps, de votre temps aujourd'hui ensemble sur ce sujet. Donc, ce webinaire, il va être co-animé. Donc, je me présente, je m'appelle Brendan Lariec, je suis ingénieur commercial chez Matrix42 sur le territoire francophone et je serai accompagné aujourd'hui de deux collègues Matrix42 qui sont anglophones. Donc, c'est pour ça que l'introduction sera française et la présentation de produit sera en anglais. Donc, on a autour de la session Paul, qui est consultant technique sur notamment la solution FireScope qu'on va vous présenter. Et on a Rob qui est responsable commercial IMIS sur justement cette offre FireScope. Donc, ils vont prendre la parole notamment sur la présentation produit et sur la partie questions-réponses. Juste pour préciser les règles du jeu, entre guillemets, donc tous les micros sont off, c'est-à-dire que vous avez un panel dans l'outil GoToWebinar pour poser toutes vos questions au fil de l'eau. Donc, n'hésitez pas à les soumettre au fil de la session et on va prendre 5-10 minutes en fin de session pour y répondre de manière précise. Toute la vidéo est enregistrée, donc que pour vous, pour la revoir ou pour la partager à certains collègues, vous recevrez la vidéo et le PowerPoint que je vais vous présenter à l'instant. Et sinon, profitez bien de cette session, soyez interactifs, posez vos questions. Et on essaiera d'y répondre du mieux possible et de la manière la plus précise possible également. Donc, let's go. Donc, juste pour préciser, parmi vous autour de la session, donc il y a des clients qui nous connaissent déjà. D'ailleurs, je vous salue chaleureusement. Et il y a également des prospects. Donc, juste pour repositionner qui est Matrix42, comment on se positionne, ce qu'on propose sur le marché et finalement notre ADN. Vraiment en quelques slides pour pas faire trop lourd, trop marketing, mais juste vous redonner les messages principaux. Donc Matrix42, on est éditeur européen avec une présence globale, mondiale. On a un siège social qui est basé en Allemagne, à Francfort. On est très présent de facto sur les territoires germanophones, mais également de plus en plus sur les territoires latins. Donc la France, bien entendu, l'Italie, l'Espagne, le Portugal. Et également donc sur la partie nord-américaine et notamment depuis quelques mois maintenant grâce à l'acquisition de FireScope qui était un éditeur à part entière jusqu'à il y a quelques temps qui proposait la solution qu'on va vous démontrer aujourd'hui autour de la cartographie, CMDB, alimentation, construction, gestion des assets et qui du coup rejoint naturellement le portfolio Matrix42. Et on va vous expliquer à travers quel cas d'usage, justement, ça vient de manière très complémentaire, alimenter tous les process que vous utilisez déjà en partie dans la plateforme. Sachant que, bien entendu, on aimerait que tout le monde, c'est un vœu pieux, on aimerait que tout le monde ait la partie service desk de Matrix42. Pour autant, c'est une solution qui peut venir en standalone et alimenter votre CMDB qui serait déjà en place chez vous, hein, que vous soyez sur des confrères type ServiceNow, Sharewell, Ivanti, peu importe, ou HP. C'est une solution qui peut venir aussi bien alimenter nativement notre CMDB. Ça va de soi qu'on a des connecteurs qui permettent de le faire très rapidement. Mais on se veut aussi respectueux des investissements que vous avez déjà fait par ailleurs, des efforts d'implémentation. Donc, on peut également s'interfacer avec d'autres plateformes. Donc, très simplement, notre leitmotiv, il est très simple. notre stratégie, elle est claire, c'est d'accompagner nos clients pour digitaliser et simplifier la manière dont ils vont gérer l'environnement du collaborateur. Ça veut dire quoi derrière? Ça veut dire gérer tout le cycle de vie du collaborateur, de son arrivée à son départ, avec toutes les évolutions de poste fonctionnelles, à travers 3 grands axes. Je lui mets à disposition des devices, donc je me dois de les maîtriser, de les sécuriser, de les alimenter, de déployer, de patcher. Je lui mets à disposition également des logiciels, donc à un moment donné, il va falloir être capable de distribuer, d'inventorier, d'être sûr que je sois bon en termes de conformité vis-à-vis de mon parc applicatif et des différents éditeurs avec qui je travaille. Et bien entendu, on va lui délivrer tout un tas de services, qu'ils soient IT ou métier, au cours de sa vie dans l'entreprise. Donc finalement, ça rejoint cette notion de plateforme unique, unifiée, transverse, qui permet finalement à un collaborateur, lorsqu'il a une question, à un client, lorsqu'il a une sollicitation, d'accéder à un portail unique qui, à travers un catalogue de services, va permettre de distribuer des services IT, des services RH, des services marketing, peu importe finalement le métier concerné. Tout ça dans le but d'avoir un seul kiosque, une seule porte d'entrée qui centralise toutes les demandes, toutes les sollicitations de l'entreprise et qui ensuite, à travers des notions d'affectation, d'escalade, de workflow, va orchestrer tout le back-office, à savoir le routage des incidents, des demandes, des sollicitations, des tickets vers les bonnes équipes de traitement. Et du coup, on masque vraiment toute l'organisation interne, tous vos process, pour avoir quelque chose de très simple, très fluide, très ergonomique en frontal. Et après, bien sûr, la puissance de la plateforme pour distribuer tout le travail et finalement tous les process utiles aux bonnes équipes internes. Quelques chiffres, je ne vais pas non plus m'attarder, ça fait 25 ans maintenant qu'on existe sur ces métiers-là. On vient du monde du endpoint, donc tout ce qui est gestion de l'inventaire, télédistribution, patch, et puis assez logiquement, on s'est étendu sur les métiers du service desk, puisque très complémentaires. On est 450 personnes sur Matrix42 et 2 indicateurs assez intéressants, au-delà du nombre de clients, c'est qu'on est capable de fidéliser nos clients. Donc, les enjeux auxquels on répond à un instant T, de par la R&D, les évolutions qu'on va apporter dans nos produits, on est capable également d'assurer et de continuer à assurer les enjeux de nos clients dans le temps. Donc, finalement, lorsqu'on travaille avec nos clients, c'est plutôt une collaboration de longue durée. Et on a également ce pouvoir d'attractivité pour aller chercher de nouveaux clients. Ça veut dire quoi? Ça veut dire qu'on est très attentif sur la vie de nos produits, continuer à investir sur nos produits, c'est ce qui va nous permettre d'être pérenne et d'être un éditeur solide et du coup de proposer toujours plus d'innovation, toujours plus d'intégration, d'automatisme, d'ergonomie. Et c'est ce qui permet justement d'avoir cette belle adhésion sur le marché. Et Matrix42 devient clairement un acteur de plus en plus identifié et apprécié par les clients. Quelques références en France avec qui nous travaillons, principalement ici du monde plutôt des entreprises de taille intermédiaire, mais pas que. D'ailleurs, certains clients vont se reconnaître à travers les logos et je vous salue au passage. Donc, on va travailler avec différents secteurs d'activité. On n'a pas un secteur privilégié par rapport à d'autres. Finalement, vous avez des objectifs, des enjeux qui sont assez transverses. Donc, on va travailler aussi bien dans le service, on va travailler dans le retail avec des gens comme Métro. On va travailler dans le monde du BTP avec des gens comme Faya, qui est un des grands groupes français dans le monde du BTP. On va travailler dans les banques, les assurances, les mutuelles. On va travailler avec des gestionnaires de parcs immobiliers, par exemple, des gens comme Gessina. Vraiment, et dans le public également. Alors vraiment quelque chose d'assez hétérogène. Tout ça, finalement, il y a en tout cas, il y a des points communs qui ont été avoir une plateforme qui adresse plusieurs sujets, la plus unifiée possible, la plus automatisée possible, ne pas laisser de côté l'ergonomie, qu'elle soit frontale, mais aussi pour les équipes des opérateurs IT qui vont traiter les incidents, les demandes, etc. Et tout ça sur fond d'urbanisation. Le but, et ce qu'on a pu opérer sur certains de ces clients-là, c'est qu'on va pouvoir harmoniser, industrialiser et décommissionner pas mal de solutions. Là où il y avait pas mal de silos auparavant, on va essayer d'embarquer ça sur la même plateforme pour unifier les process et faire en sorte d'apporter de la fluidité dans tout ça. Juste pour finir, donc, on n'est pas tout seul dans l'aventure, c'est-à-dire qu'on s'entoure de partenaires pour déployer la solution, former les équipes, implémenter, faire de la rehausse d'expertise pour, par exemple, déployer une version 2 ou un lot 2 de la solution, embarquer les RH, par exemple, dans la plateforme. Donc tout ça, il y a des experts autour de vous, il y a des partenaires qui vous accompagnent au quotidien pour vous conseiller sur la meilleure manière de procéder. Et bien entendu, on est très attentif sur les partenariats technologiques. Pourquoi? Parce que un de nos leitmotifs, c'est de proposer au maximum des connecteurs standards pour rapidement s'interfacer dans votre écosystème. Le but, il est de ne pas avoir une solution ITSM ou de gestion du endpoint qui est en standalone dans son coin. On doit et on se doit de s'interfacer dans votre écosystème pour rapidement aller chercher de l'information, mais aussi pousser de l'information vers des solutions tierces, et d'où notamment beaucoup de partenariats technologiques pour être à jour sur les solutions que vous utilisez, et par exemple récupérer très rapidement des hyperviseurs, récupérer très rapidement vos coûts dans le cloud avec les différents acteurs du marché pour centraliser tout ça dans l'asset management. Encore une fois, c'est un exemple parmi tant d'autres. Et pour finir, avant de passer la parole à Paul sur la partie vraiment dédiée FireScope, le portfolio Matrix42, il est, donc ce que vous voyez ici à l'écran, divisé en deux grands mondes. La partie gauche en vert, le monde du endpoint, la partie droite en bleu, le monde du process et de l'optimisation de coûts. Donc, ce que ça sous-entend derrière chez nous, ça va être la gestion technique du parc, qu'il soit serveur, poste de travail ou mobile. Donc, on a une gestion unifiée de finalement tout cet environnement assez hétérogène en termes de device, mais aussi en termes d'OS et d'applications. On a également une offre de sécurité autour des devices qui va permettre de faire de l'encryption, de monitorer les flux, à savoir être sûr que, par exemple, je suis un industriel, je vais être sûr que des plans AutoCAD ne sortent pas sur des clés USB ou dans des drives personnels. Et donc, sur la partie droite, l'aspect process, donc bien sûr, toute la panoplie ITSM, les process utiles avec le portail de service, le catalogue de services et toute la panoplie des process utiles back-office, mais également de manière très liée, ce qu'on appelle le SAM, la gestion des licences logicielles d'un point de vue conformité, être sûr que je sois bon avec par exemple, mon logiciel Oracle, mon logiciel Microsoft, mes logiciels IBM, vraiment l'aspect conformité, mais aussi l'axe optimisation financière. Et tout ça se repose sur une plateforme unique qui a vocation justement à soutenir ces process et à travers deux notions importantes, à simplifier ces process et à simplifier le run de la plateforme. Vous avez la capacité à travers le Solution Builder de revoir tous les écrans de l'application, de les simplifier, complexifier, vraiment de les amender, voire créer de nouveaux écrans si besoin. Et sur le même principe, les workflows sont entièrement customisables. On propose du standard, mais rien ne vous empêche à travers un module très graphique, encore une fois, de les simplifier, de les complexifier, de rajouter un peu ce qui vous est propre et ce qui ne serait pas prévu dans les usages de base du workflow en question. Donc voilà, vraiment ces deux grands mondes. FireScope, pourquoi FireScope? Donc, FireScope, on va faire le focus là dans la slide d'après avec Paul. FireScope, donc c'est une solution qui va découvrir vos infrastructures, qu'elles soient legacy, on-premise, cloud. Donc on a vraiment cette approche de l'environnement hybride. Tout ça dans le but de collecter tous les assets IT, de les comprendre, de les connaître, de les maîtriser, d'allumer la lumière finalement sur toute l'infrastructure, sur toute votre infrastructure, et de modéliser graphiquement les interdépendances entre tout ça. Et finalement, FireScope vient compléter naturellement toute la boucle, à savoir que ça va pouvoir alimenter la CMDB ou le CMS dans le jargon utile à un instant T, mais dans le temps. C'est-à-dire que continuellement, votre CMDB elle est alimentée. Et c'est souvent là l'objectif premier, c'est qu'une CMDB à un instant T, c'est plutôt facile à construire. Une CMDB, le principal objectif et écueil d'une CMDB, c'est de la maintenir à jour dans le temps. Donc, on va vous expliquer comment on peut justement vous accompagner là-dessus. Bien sûr, ça va alimenter le process incident pour mieux diagnostiquer ou diagnostiquer plus rapidement des incidents de production critiques. Bien sûr, ça va alimenter les changes pour mieux maîtriser et anticiper les impacts du changement sur l'infrastructure et in fine sur les services qui sont délivrés à des métiers, à des collaborateurs, à des clients. Donc, FireScope vient finalement alimenter tous les process qu'on avait l'habitude de déployer chez nos clients et arrive vraiment sur une brique complémentaire pour apporter encore plus de valeur à notre offre. Donc, voilà un petit peu ce que je voulais vous expliquer. Alors, pour ceux qui ne nous connaissaient pas encore, donc l'offre est disponible en mode SaaS, en mode on-premise, et on est sur un modèle économique en mode user, c'est-à-dire que la licence s'indexe sur le nombre de collaborateurs de l'entreprise, et du coup, ça sous-entend qu'on se connecte en illimité sur la partie back-office. Let's go to the product. So, Paul, I let you to take the end on the session. So I will promote you as the organizer. And the stage is yours.
Thank you, Brendan. Let me just set my screen up.
Yeah. Perfect. We can see it.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Paul Yates. I'm the Senior Technical Consultant at Matrix42, formerly from FireScope. And I'm here this morning to talk to you about our product SDDM, which is Secure Discovery and Dependency Mapping. I've got an in-depth overview here to give you a good idea of what the product does, but in a nutshell, what we're looking to do is to discover everything on your network, to then discover how it communicates to each other, how everything relates to each other, each piece of equipment relates to another piece, and then to take that a stage further in that we can tell you how those relationships and those assets support your critical business services, so that you can understand what runs your business, how to keep it running, and how to look after the entire environment. So I'll start off with talking about what we call our asset maturity model. And then I'm going to go through simple cases of what the product can do for you, why it can do it, and how it does it. So the first one is going to be know what you don't know, which means exactly that. Most companies don't actually understand what is on their network 100%. They've usually got a pretty good idea, but there's always something that somebody's forgotten to switch off, or somebody's forgotten about that used to be there a few years ago and it's still there doing some function. So we want to help you understand what that is. We can then take all that data and bring it across to a CMDB as well. So that enables you to do things like asset lifecycle management and full managed change control. As you can see in use case 3, we're going to be giving you all the information you need to make risk analysis decisions for change control. And then the fourth situation is, what about if you want to move from a service from the data center to the cloud, for example, or you just want to change data centers or anything like that. If you want to pick services up and move them from one spot to another, what are the risks? How can you identify the risks, and how can you de-risk that situation and make everything smooth as possible and functional when it gets to the other side? And then, as I say, at the end there'll be times for me to answer any questions. So if you've got any questions, you can put them into the questions field in the GoToWebinar, and we'll address them at appropriate time. So we are very much involved in the ITIL world, and we took a look at the ITIL process maturity model, which aims to take a business from being chaotic through to being fully managed, fully controlled, fully documented, fully process driven, fully understood. And we realized that there's elements of this that can also be applied to IT assets. And by IT assets, I mean anything that's on your network that has an IP address, basically. So anything that's on your network and it's communicating, performing a function. And that's not just limited to servers and desktops and printers and things like that. You know, we've got customers who use things in hospitals like heartbeat monitors, blood pressure monitors, and things like that. So anything that sits on a network is an IT asset. And those assets are there for a reason, but you need to understand before you can start looking at what they're doing is what's there. So let's take you from level 0, where you don't have a clue what's on your network, to up to level 1, where now I understand everything that's there. And now can I move on a bit? So can I understand how everything on my network relates to everything else? So as an example, you will have a number of virtual guest machines on your network. Those guest machines will be absolutely reliant on the hosts that host them. If the host goes down, the guests automatically go down. So you need to understand those relationships. Same with relationships between servers and switches, for example. You need to understand, if I'm going to go and touch that switch, what's the servers that might be impacted. Then can we move you on to level 2? Can we then take all that information we've got and work out how it then supports your critical business services? So now I understand what I've got, but what is it that actually supports my payroll? What it supports my production, my ERP, my SAP, my email? What are the components that I'm absolutely reliant on to drive those businesses? Well, we'll help you understand those. And once you get to level 2, you can start looking forward to levels 3 and 4, which are then, now I understand what I've got, how can we monitor it? And then going on from there, not only now how can I monitor it, but how can I make sure of its performance? How can I do predictive analysis, SLAs, all of those good things to show you just how well you're doing. Levels 3 and 4 are for the monitoring side, which I'm not going to be talking about today. So for today, we are concentrating on the first 3 levels. This is what SDDM will allow you to do. Take you from not having a clue to what's on your network to fully understanding it, fully understanding relationships, and fully understanding the businesses, the business services they support. So our solution is largely cloud-based. If you really don't want a cloud-based solution, we can pick the cloud up and put it on your premise if you wish, but it is primarily a cloud-based solution. And the reason for that is explained on the left-hand side. I'm trying to represent here with all these rectangles here, is you will invariably have multiple different environments within your organization. You'll have one or more data centers. You may have one or more cloud environments. You may have one or more remote sites, one or more custom sites. What I'm trying to say here is it doesn't matter. Our solution is the same for all of them. What we'll do is we'll come along and we'll drop in that orange box there, which is called an edge device. It's a little VM, but it's a big VM, which all it's doing is gathering data. It's pulling data from your network. It's looking at network traffic as a passive sort of discovery. And then it's doing active discoveries on top of that to enrich the information it's gathering. It doesn't matter if it's a data center, a cloud, a remote site, we still use the same approach. We'll take an edge device, one or more of them, we'll put them within that environment so that we can see the data that's being gathered and everything's going on your network. The edge device then simply sends all that information to the cloud, which is where all the processing goes on. We do all the normalization, deduplication, aggregation, etc. Now, the advantage of doing this is that we can then let you as a client log into the cloud, and you've got a single pane of glass across your entire environment. You can see everything that we have seen from one place. On top of that, we can then take all the data that we've now got in the cloud and we can send it to a CMDB. So we can synchronize that data across to a CMDB, which puts you in a position where your CMDB knows all your CIs, knows all the data about them, and knows all their relationships, and therefore you've got your asset lifecycle management starting point, you've got your change management starting point. Similarly, we can send alerts. I'll explain why we need to send alerts in a little while. Then on top of that, we can also export the data to another database, which allows you to use BI. Any of your BI reporting tools, if you wish to do so, you can do all your own reporting using your own tools out of our data. So that's the architecture, that's the solution that we propose. It's a SaaS-based, cloud-based solution, but the key here is the solution to any of your environments is we just pick an edge up, we'll drop it into your environment, and it gathers the data for you. So with that said, let's take a look at our use cases, what it is that we can actually do for you. So the first thing is, as I said before, know what you don't know. And many customers we find really don't know exactly what's on their network. It is very often that we'll do an implementation here and we'll hear from the customer once we show them the map that we find, well, we switched that machine off 2 years ago. Well, you may have meant to, but clearly we've discovered it, it's active, it's doing something, you didn't switch it off. So we're looking to find out for you what's on your network, present you a picture of your network, showing you all of the networked equipment. We might not know what that piece of equipment is at this stage. We know it's there, we know it's got an IP address and it's talking. And how many different ways is it talking and what's it talking to? So this is a passive discovery. And I'll explain why it being a passive discovery is important in a short while. But all we're doing here is we are deploying our edge device. We're asking you to configure network devices, switches and routers and virtual environment to send us network traffic. And we are consuming and analyzing that network traffic. And then we're presenting you, the results are being, here's every CI on your network. Now, I mentioned before, this is a passive directory, it's persistent and passive. And the importance of doing this is because if we were just only do active discoveries can only find what's on the network at the time they run. And the nature of networks mean that things come and go. So by doing the passive persistent discovery through network traffic, we will see everything that ever touches your network, even if in the 3 cases I've got here, these are very transient things. They don't happen very often or for very long. So in these cases here, the first case is this device suddenly woke up because it's a support box for a support company. They use it to connect into, to jump across to give you support. That activity might happen once every month or however time the support is required. And unless you happen to be doing an active discovery at exactly that moment, you won't see that event, which means when you go on later on to build a service map, that server, that critical server, because it's part of your support system, isn't known about, and you might migrate it without that device. The second one is a load balancing event. What if you've got a failover cluster of some description and it fails over at some point, the second cluster turns up, 5 minutes later the problem's resolved and it flips back to the active one again. That event again will be missed in an active discovery, but we will see it in a passive discovery because we will see that machine suddenly start talking. And then finally, what about you've got some sort of batch processing system that sends emails out once a night. Again, if that's running and you're not doing an active discovery, you've missed that. We will see it. So that's why we say we will tell you what you don't know, because we will find everything that shows itself on the network at any point. So wouldn't it be nice then to take what you've got, you now know what you've got, let's go and find something about it and get the root data for all of these CIs to populate the CMDB. Let's go and find things like the make, model, serial number, all that asset information. Well, that's exactly what we do. We do it automatically and we do it accurately and we do it continuously. So what we do is, again, we deploy the edge devices. We're still going to do the network traffic because that's part of the problem, the process as well. But now we're going to just configure some actual active jobs. So this is where we said we know what we found. We've been and discovered them using our passive methods. Now let's go and look at those things in more detail. We're then going to have the ability to synchronize that across to a CMDB. So everything we find, we can tell the CMDB, ending up with your CMDB populated with all of your CIs that you wish to send and all of the data that you wish to gather. So here's an example of a batch of active discovery jobs we've got running. These will go out and they'll do things like attempt to identify the operating system using OS fingerprinting. It'll look at the ports that are open and trying to establish what the device might be. For example, if it's got the IP phone port enabled, it's either an IP phone or it's an IP phone server. So we've already identified what this thing might be. We use SNMP to try and get data out of it. We use many different techniques. But these are active discoveries built on top of our passive discoveries, so now we're gathering more data. The methods we can use to gather data, we don't need them to go and find them, to tell them. We don't need them to discover relationships, and we don't need them to map them to your services. We only need agents to enrich the data if you want to populate the data into a CMDB, and you don't want to use any other method. Other methods we use, I will talk to your virtual hypervisor and get information about your virtual devices. We can use WMI, SSH, SNMP, REST API. There are numerous different ways we can go about gathering data from these devices. And the key here is we're trying to remove a manual process. Building a CMDB is typically a manual process. You're entering the data for an asset manually. You're entering all the information about that asset as you get it delivered. We can do it all automatically for you. This is an example of the sort of asset data we typically gather. So here I've got the make, the model, the MAC address, the operating system version, its serial number, its memory. These are just sort of some of the typical out-of-the-box attributes that we can gather. But every customer has different requirements. So what if the customer wants something more out of the ordinary? Well, that's not a problem at all. We have the ability to add our own fields to it as well. So in this case, this is a customer who actually wants to know about each of their servers, CPU type, how many CPUs, and the speed of the CPU. So we gather that data, we'll put it into these custom fields, and all of our custom fields can also be sent across to the CMDB as well. So this is to solve the second use case of let's go and find out the data about the CIs and populate them into the CMDB. That's the approach that we take to achieve that. Third use case. We want to make puts ourselves into a position where we can make informed decisions about changes, planned changes. We want to be able to make informed risk analysis. So to do that, we need to understand firstly how our assets rely on each other, how they support our critical business services. It's no good me knowing that that machine supports my payroll, but not also knowing that it also supports my HR system, for example. You need to understand the full relationship so that you can make those informed decisions. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you that data. We're going to help you achieve that. I'm going to show you how we do that. So again, the format is the same. It's an edge device. We're doing the discovery jobs. We're still going to get network traffic, but now we've got the step about building service maps. Service maps are generated purely from the network traffic, so no agents are required to do this, and I'm going to show you now how we achieve it. And we achieve it by analyzing network traffic. So all that traffic that we've collected, all we do is we reduce it down to what machine spoke to which machine on which port, how often, and how much data. That's the only 5 pieces of information we gather. We don't look into the traffic in any way, shape, or form. We're not interested in what the traffic contains. It's just who's speaking to who on what port. And the way we achieve then identifying the business services is we're seeing traffic hundreds and thousands of times a minute, an hour, depending upon the size of the network. We're seeing the same patterns of traffic over and over again. So we'll see suddenly some activity triggered from server A. That server starts talking to servers B, C, and D, which in turn starts a conversation to servers E, F, and G. We will follow that flow of traffic up and down, over and over and over again. And we're building up a confidence factor to say, this is something that happens very, very frequently. This is something that happens very repeatedly. It's probably a business service. So we're gathering that information and storing it away. At the same time, we're seeing this happening from server A all of the time. So we're starting to think, well, we think this is a business service, and we think it starts at server A. So let's put that to one side so that when we come to map something, we've got all that ready to hand. So we've built that list of what we call service entry points. We've decided that if these activities keep happening from this known place, so let's give you that information. So when you come along and you say, okay, let's map our first service, my question to you is, what is the service you want to map? What's the starting point? What do the clients go to use that service? And hopefully you're going to tell me it's one of those in that list there. As you can see in that top one, there's an entry there on port 80, so it's a web server of some sort, and 1,279 clients have been seen to connect to it. This is almost definitely a service. 1,200 clients wouldn't connect to a server randomly. So this is a service that we're going to want to map. So we'll find the service you want to map, we'll tick the checkbox, and we'll go and hit the service group button to give it a name. And that's how we'll then go and build an application service. So what am I talking about when I'm saying about building an application service? Well, this is mapping all the aspects of business service from an application perspective to see all the dependencies included. And it's exactly what we do, is produce you a map. This is a map of a business service. And what it's showing you is servers talking to servers. There's actually some clusters of servers in there. Those boxes are clusters. And this is showing you all of the infrastructure that supports this service from a server point of view. And this is all gathered from network traffic. So what I'm showing you here is servers talking to servers, and this is a representation of a cluster. The very first service we map won't look as clean as this because we see everything that touches your services. So we will see your Active Directory traffic, we'll see your antivirus traffic, we'll see backups. And this is where we need to work with you to establish what it is you would like to see on a service, because no two customers have the same thoughts. So my first question to you when we start building this service is, do you want to see Active Directory on here? Now my advice to you would be, no, Active Directory is a service in its own right. So let's remove it from all the other services and map it in its own right. So we'll then remove it from this service by setting up a set of exclusions. The service gets rebuilt and you've suddenly got your service a bit clearer because the Active Directory stuff is away. Then we look at the antivirus. Do you want to build a service with including antivirus in here? The answer should be probably no. Antivirus, again, is a service in its own right. Let's take that away and let's reduce the clutter on this service. Now, the reason for doing this approach is very important. Go back to what I said about telling you what you don't know. Well, it's exactly the same when we're building a service. We're showing you everything that's touched a service. But if you say to us, I want you to assume that the antivirus and all of this shouldn't be there right from the start, then we're not showing you everything. We're automatically excluding stuff, and there might be things that we miss. So we start by showing you everything, and then we pare down what you don't need. So eventually you get to the point where the first service is clean. You've validated everything's there. We've achieved the goal of building up that list of exclusions. Of course, what we can now do is take that list of exclusions and add them to the second service. So we've already done all the work to make the second service clean. So the second and subsequent services are much, much quicker to build. The first one, you've got to do the reduction and build up the exclusions, but the second, third, and subsequent ones become much, much quicker. So that, again, that's just built from network traffic. But now, because of our other active discoveries, we can go and build some more data in. So now we add in the virtual layer. So what I'm showing you here, for example, is the example I used earlier. I've got a virtual host that supports 2 virtual guests in this service. That relationship is critical to this service. If I want to go and make a change to the host, I need to be aware that I'm going to have a possible impact on those 2 guests, and therefore a possible impact on this service. Over here, I'm showing some some virtual storage. That virtual storage hosts the virtual hosts. So again, now, if I'm going to go and look at and touch that virtual storage and make a change to it, I risk impacting those 3 hosts, and therefore 3 guests, and therefore my service. So again, now I've got the data up to hand to go and make those informed decisions. Finally, we'll add in the network layer. We can talk to all your switches and routers and work out how they all link together, and then how they link together in your service. So here's a network switch supporting multiple other pieces of networked equipment. Yes, the map looks a bit busy, but what you have there is an accurate representation of every IT asset that supports this business service. There isn't another piece of equipment on your network that impacts this service that you have said you wanted to see. That's everything. And that's important because that's the point at which you do what's called baseline. And doing a baseline is putting a line in the sand to say, that is what my service should look like. Now I understand that, that's what I send across to the CMDB. And the whole point there is your CMDB now knows exactly what your service should look like. And if you're going to do any changes now, you know what it should look like, and you know what all the impact risk analysis are. Now the thing is, you've built that service, you've sent it across the CMDB, and that's great. But that doesn't stop there. We're still doing this in real time. We're still looking at everything that's connecting to this service. If we see something change in that service, a port usage changes, a server goes down, a server comes up, starts talking to it, and a piece of equipment starts talking to it, we will see that deviation to the baseline, and we will alert you. And this is important because one of 2 things will be happening. You will either be in the middle of a managed change, in which case, great, you've now got confirmation that the change you said you were going to make has been made, and you've seen that impact on the network. You come into our software, you acknowledge that change because it was planned, synchronize it back across to the CMDB. You can now close your change control because you know the full cycle has been completed. You raised it, you did all your preparation, you made the change, we saw it, you told us it was genuine, we closed it all down. We're back in sync. The CMDB and us are now in level again. The other side of that is if we sent you an alert, say something's changed and you're not in a managed change, there has been an unauthorized change. Whatever the reason might be, somebody has done something that they haven't got permission to do. It might have been a failure of a piece of equipment, it might have been an accidental change made by someone, or it might be malicious. We can't tell that, but what we can do is tell you something's changed so you've got the power to go and investigate it rapidly. So that's a very important security aspect in not only have you built it, but we're still checking it in real time, and we're going to tell you when something changes. Last use case then, data center and cloud migration. So we've built all that data, we've got everything. How does it help us make these decisions on whether we can move this service, whether we can reclaim the equipment, whether we can move it all to the cloud and switch our entire data center off? So again, the process is exactly the same as we did before. We're going to do the edge, we're going to do the discovery jobs, we're going to build the service maps. But we're now going to be concentrating on this thing we call the risk analysis dashboard. Now, the risk analysis dashboard gets automatically built when you build your second service. When you build your second service, we can start looking at how those services relate to each other. And what we're doing here is we're then saying to you, if you wanted to pick up all of the equipment that touches this service, this is our analysis of the risk of doing so to other services. So if we take that first box, the knowledge base, the green box, for example, it's telling you it's 100% guaranteed you can move that service with no risk. Well, considering that service has got one client in it and nothing else, that makes sense. It's not going to have any possible impact. It's just an example for presentation purposes. But if you then look at the claims processing one, it's got a very low number, it's in red, it's saying to you, this is a risky move. What it's telling you is there are 6 servers in the claims processing service that are used by other services. So you could pick up everything from your claims processing. We've told you what all the components are. You can pick them all up. You can go and move them to your new data center, move them to your cloud environment. But if you then switch them off, 4 services are going to be affected, and you're going to have 4 service owners come in because they're very unhappy that you've broken their services. Furthermore, you can drill down into that to say, what are those services and what are those cross dependencies? So I now know that all those 4 services also use those bits of equipment that are used by the service I'm looking to move. I now have the power to say, what am I going to do about those? Am I going to de-risk those? Am I going to migrate those services? Am I going to take their dependencies from those equipment away? Or can we not do this until we're also in a position to move these as well? That data is also sent across to the CMDB. So from the CMDB and from our software, just by selecting a CI, you can see which CIs does it relate to and all of its services. And you can do that from the service map as well. So you've got all of the combinations of information you need to make an informed risk analysis decision about any migration activity you wish to undertake. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions that haven't already been asked, now would be a good time to ask them.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Thank you. Yes, there are some questions coming in the panel of GoToWebinar. So one of the questions is how we license FireScope as a solution. So the license metric for FireScope is based on each device having an IP address, and we can exclude some scope if we don't want to monitor a specific scope. We can only focus on a range, but the main metric is each device coming with an IP address and discovered on the network.
Yeah. Brendan, maybe I can just help you and add to that a little bit. So the normal calculation that we use is based on IT assets. Each IT asset has one IP address, as you said. Within that, we separate out assets so that we have essentially infrastructure assets and also endpoint assets. So infrastructure would be things like switches or firewalls or routers. Endpoints will be things like, say, desktops or tablets. So we can separate those out and have two sort of separate licenses from those. The other thing that I would sort of say is that generally speaking, customers are happy with this model because it allows them to maybe select, a subset of their overall network if they want. So for example, if they have different offices or different environments, they can maybe pick one environment to start with before expanding to other environments. Similarly, for things like monitoring or whatever that they want to capture data for, they can possibly select their top services. So the IT assets approach allows them to pick subsets of their environment so that they can then build on that going forward. Okay, so I hope that helps.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the precision. Another one is how we deal with Kubernetes environment with containers, traffics, and so on.
Yeah, so Kubernetes is something that we will see. We will see that the Kubernetes servers are there to get inside the Kubernetes and show what's occurring at the moment. That is something that currently we can't support, but it is on the roadmap to be developed. So yeah, it's the same with Docker as well. The containerized environments, we will know they're there, we'll see everything going in and out of them, but we'll just present that server as a single entity for today, but both are on the roadmap to be resolved.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Another question is, how long does it take to build a service, the initial and subsequent services?
Yeah, so I can answer this from experience of just last week. I was working with a customer building their first service. Their first service took us approximately, but this assumes that you've got all the data and all the preparation work's been done. To build the service, first service took about 3 hours because they had to go and look up some of the equipment that we were finding to say whether or not it was part of the service. Turned out they had quite a lot of security equipment that was doing scanning as well, so that shows up in our service map. The second service took 15 minutes. So once you've got your list of exclusions, the remaining services are very, very quick. It just comes down to the thing that might take the time subsequently is if we do discover something that you do not know what it is, because we're telling you it's part of the service and there needs to be an investigation to go and establish what that is, because it could be a critical part of the service that you've just forgotten about or don't understand.
Okay, thanks. And another one coming is FireScope is a standalone solution, or do we need to implement Matrix42 platform also? So maybe I can answer this question. So effectively, you can deploy FireScope as a standalone solution, cloud-based. You don't need to have the ITSM or Imperium platform in your environment, and you can only deploy this this solution, and you can feed the CMDB you already have if you have Matrix42 or another one. But there is no prerequisite to have Matrix42 already deployed in your company. Another one is where is the cloud hosted, and can the data stay in France? Maybe Rob, you can answer it.
Yeah. So look, basically at the moment we have a cloud instance in the UK, we have a cloud instance in Germany, but if we need any sort of cloud environment so that you keep data in France, this is no problem. We just set this up. It takes a couple of hours to do this, and we have an environment set up in France. So if there is a requirement for any customers to keep the data in France, then this is absolutely no problem and will not cause any issues or delays in the project.
Okay, perfect, thanks. There is another one, very specific, because I think this question is from a customer using Imperium. So Imperium is our solution in Matrix42 to manage the laptops in terms of inventory, distribution of software, and so on. So the question is, do we need to replace our Imperium agent, or we need to deploy another one? So FireScope from one end and Imperium on the other end are use different technology. So Imperium use a physical agent on each device, and FireScope doesn't need to deploy any agent because it's an edge device, and the device, which is a virtual machine, will see on the network the packages the header and conclude which kind of data is sending from a point A to a point B. So it's very different in a technology perspective. So if you have a program, you still need the agent to get the inventory and to deploy your applications. And FireScope is another VM deployed on the network, and it's a very different technology used behind.
Just to add to that,
yeah,
the only time you would need to put a FireScope agent out there is if you're looking to gather data for CMDB population, and even then that isn't an absolute hard root prerequisite. There are other ways we can do it, but to do the mapping and the discovery, we don't need an agent. That is an important point. There is no agent needed to discover, to map, and to create dependencies. Yes,
correct. That's a very key point in the solution and the strengths. You don't need to deploy any agent on the server or on the different device in the infrastructure or in the cloud. I think that's all. Maybe another one coming. If I am already using a competitor like ServiceNow or Sharewell, can I get the information to my CMDB?
Yes, absolutely. If you're using those CMDBs, we have integration into both of those, so we can automatically take our data and put it into your CMDB, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I think it's all for this session.
Brendan, yeah. I think there's one more there. I'll just read the question and maybe Paul, you can answer. It says, do you provide an update signature library file for inventory scope? I'm not sure if I fully understand that question, but does that make sense to you, Paul?
Doesn't make a lot of sense from our product. I'm guessing that's some sort of software asset management question, and we aren't doing software asset management. We're looking at application discovery. So an application to us is a piece of software that sits across multiple layers of hardware, but we're not into software asset management. That's an area that Matrix have got covered. Now, I don't know if that has answered the question, but I don't understand what the signature file is. We have no need for any signature files.
Yeah,
correct.
We can probably follow that question up anyway with the person who raised the question.
Yeah, we will precise it. Okay, thanks Paul, thanks Rob. It was a very good picture of FireScope. So I will switch in French if you don't mind to conclude. Donc merci à tous d'avoir participé à la session. J'espère que vous avez apprécié, j'espère que ça vous a permis de mieux comprendre finalement la solution FireScope et les différents cas d'usage qu'on peut embarquer. Donc très complémentaire de ce qu'on fait déjà par ailleurs. Et ça vous permet vraiment d'allumer la lumière sur toute l'infrastructure, qu'elle soit cloud ou on-premise, de mieux comprendre vos assets, à minima, de les connaître et de les collecter. Et après, bien sûr, la couche supplémentaire, ça permet de cartographier les dépendances qui permettent de soutenir derrière des services délivrés. Donc, ça a vraiment différents vertus. Souvent, ce qu'on fait, c'est qu'on peut également poker la solution. On prend vraiment un axe précis, vraiment un écueil qui est assez lourd ou pénible à gérer aujourd'hui chez vous, et on peut justement travailler sur ce cas d'usage précisément et démontrer finalement alors j'allais dire en quelques heures, en tout cas en très peu de temps, comment on peut vous aider sur ces aspects-là. Donc comme je l'ai dit en introduction, la vidéo elle a été enregistrée, donc elle vous parviendra automatiquement avec le PowerPoint également. Et puis bien entendu, que ce soit moi, Paul, Rob ou toute l'équipe Matrix42, et les partenaires bien entendu, on reste à votre disposition pour creuser ces sujets-là. Si vous avez des réflexions ou des projets à venir, n'hésitez pas à nous en faire part, qu'on puisse à minima en discuter. Et puis on reste à disposition pour creuser la solution ou faire des démonstrations plus précises, peut-être sur des axes qui vous semblent pertinents dans votre contexte à vous. Et puis voilà. Donc j'espère que vous avez apprécié. Passez à tous une très bonne journée, une très bonne fin de semaine. Appréciez bien le week-end qui vient par la suite. Et puis je vous dis à très bientôt pour de nouveaux webinaires ou pour de nouveaux meetings en one-to-one. Très bonne journée à tous. Bye bye Rob, bye bye Paul.